That's great. Are we recording? Yeah, so we're recording just now. So it's lovely to have everyone here. The session's being recorded as well. So if you're listening to this subsequently, we hope that you find the session useful and beneficial to you. And we're delighted to have our guest speakers as well. I've got the delightful job of just introducing Jennifer Blake. So Jen was one of the students on the MSc pre-registration master's program here at GCU, and I'm the program lead for that. So Jen joined the program in January 2019, and she's been an exemplary student throughout. She's also been the class rep throughout the program as well. Throughout my time working with Jen as one of the lecturers, she's really always kind of shown passion in terms of sustainability, in terms of any green ecological issues and things like that as well. So I also supervised Jen on her dissertation, which was in relation to sustainability in nursing. So it's excellent that we've stayed in touch, and Jen is working hard on a publication at the moment as well. So we're delighted to have her to speak to you today, and to tell you guys a little bit about the work that she's done in relation to nursing and sustainable healthcare. So I'll hand you over to Jen if you're ready.
Lovely, thank you very much, David, and it's great to be here. So yes, really great to see everybody, and welcome to the webinar. So can I move on slides here? Perfect, good stuff. Great, so before I talk about nursing and sustainable healthcare, I'll just explain a wee bit about why this came to my attention in the first place. So my background from my undergraduate degree is in wildlife biology, but I've always had a passion for nature, the outdoors and health, and an interest in climate change. But laterally and throughout my placements at Glasgow Caledonian, I discovered the impact that healthcare is having on the environment, as well as the impacts of climate change on our health. So I'm going to start off with a bit of background information about climate change and its impact on our public health and well-being before I discuss what it means for nursing and how we as healthcare professionals can make our practice more sustainable. So the Lancet Countdown on Health and Climate Change monitors the evolving health profile of the climate, and they have said that climate change is the biggest global health threat of the 21st century. They acknowledge that the effects of climate change on health will affect most populations in the next decades and put the lives and well-being of billions of people at increased risk. So there's a wee video that I'm just going to show here, which just gives an overview of the impact of climate change on public health. A lot of things might be a recap for many people, but I think it's a really good sort of concise introduction to the topic.
The COVID-19 pandemic has given us a glimpse of a possible future.
Video working?
It has shown us that when health is threatened on a...
Is that working okay?
It's not showing, it's just the...
Oh, it might not actually link in which case I can put it up at the end, which isn't a problem at all.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, that's
the COVID-19...
Right, so the video explains the impacts that climate change is having on our environmental and social determinants of health, and it's a really, really good one. So I will I'll link it into the chat, and you can all have a wee look. So the video explains that climate change impacts environmental and social determinants of health, and it has a negative effect on air and water quality, shelter and food, and it increases the prevalence of infectious diseases. The World Health Organization have estimated that between 2030 and 2050, around 250,000 additional deaths per year will be directly attributable to climate change. However, healthcare itself has a large carbon footprint, with the NHS producing about 5.4% of UK carbon emissions. This is the equivalent to the greenhouse gas emissions from about 11 coal-fired power stations, which is a figure that comes from 2020. Healthcare therefore has a responsibility to adopt more sustainable practices to protect both our planet and public health. So this infographic here outlines some of the impacts of climate change on our public health. Notably, the elderly and those with comorbidities are most vulnerable to the effects. There's been an increased acknowledgement in recent years of climatic events which have had an effect on health, such as the 2003 heatwave in Europe, which resulted in more than 70,000 additional deaths as a result of respiratory and cardiovascular events. A more recent example can be seen in the story of Ellie Kissadebra, who died in 2013 after an asthma attack. The court have since found that air pollution made a material contribution to Ella's death. Indeed, air pollution has been found to be the greatest environmental threat to public health in the UK. So as you can see on the infographic here, climate change can increase the prevalence of infectious diseases by expanding transmission ranges. This can introduce new diseases to areas previously unaffected and make it easier for them to spread. Similarly, more extreme weather events can also contribute to an increase in the transmission of infectious diseases, the impacts of which are typically felt in areas with poorer infrastructure. So just to chat a wee bit about something called climate justice. So climate justice can be described as looking at the climate crisis through a human rights lens, and it identifies how it's a problem faced by all. However, its impacts are not felt in equal proportion by different communities. So climate justice involves the consideration for the responsibilities of global warming, the impact of its consequences, and the action needed. Resource consumption and greenhouse gas emission is arguably greater in countries with economic advantage. However, the negative effects of climate change, such as flooding, drought, and heat waves, are impacting people in areas who have more vulnerable infrastructure, less access to clean water, and poorer healthcare. Within our role as nurses, we have a responsibility to develop a global health awareness and advocate for people who do not have sufficient access to healthcare. There are many links between health and social inequality and climate change, and our action to reduce the impact we're having on the environment is really important to reduce the impact it is having on vulnerable communities. So what is sustainable healthcare? So sustainable healthcare is where we look to maintain a healthy environment and manage our resources to meet our current needs without compromising our future generations' health or depleting natural resources. So healthcare contributes to climate change through transport, running high energy facilities, and on a more relatable note for ground staff, single-use plastics, procurement, and waste production. In NHS England, 80% of their carbon emissions stem from treatment and care. Coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic, there have been many suggestions that this could be an excellent opportunity for a green recovery, and indeed NHS Scotland have pledged to be net zero by 2045 at the latest. So why now and why nurses? So the video which you'll be able to see later on and said that it's a good time to be seeing these challenges. Additionally, addressing climate change is a key aim within the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and it also aligns with the Nursing and Midwifery Council Future Nurse Proficiencies for Practice. The Royal College of Nursing and the International Council of Nurses have both outlined statements detailing their commitment to tackle climate change and promote green nursing and healthcare. Nurses and midwives account for approximately 50% of the world's healthcare workforce, and we could therefore have a great influence in responding to these challenges. However, we are consequently one of the highest users of consumables, but this means we could engage with procurement to influence sustainable product choices. As nurses, we are also in privileged positions to provide health promotion to our patients and the public, and we are seen as trusted voices. We could use these voices to advocate for change, both through education and through influencing policies and practices. So work on improving sustainability in nursing is already underway. I've mentioned the Royal College of Nursing's commitment to tackling climate change, and they have online resources outlining this, including their Small Changes, Big Differences project, which focuses on procurement, and their campaigns such as Glove Awareness Week, which hopefully Rose will touch upon a wee bit later. The University of Plymouth were named Green Gown Award winners in 2014 for their work on integrating sustainability into their nursing curriculum. They've also worked to develop the Nurses Toolkit, which aims to put climate change and sustainability into their healthcare training. Yenny and Sarah from the University of Plymouth will talk more about this later as well. In Scotland, NHS Tayside with the University of Dundee have embedded sustainable healthcare and planetary health into their undergraduate medical programmes, but there are so many opportunities for good green practice, both as student nurses, educators, and registered nurses alike. So my interest in global health, the environment, and climate change sparked my interest from my master's research project. When I started my nursing journey, I was keen to combine my interests, and I'm strong in my conviction that people's and planetary health are interlinked and reliant on each other. For my dissertation, I decided to explore this further from a nurse's perspective. The aim for my research was to look at how nurses can contribute to improvement of sustainability in healthcare in response to the challenges of climate change. I wanted to identify recommendations, barriers, and facilitators to improving our contribution, and also to inspire nurses about sustainability. It became evident throughout my research that there's very little data from a nursing perspective. However, the research that I did collect unanimously spoke about the requirement for sustainable healthcare to be included in nursing education and to be promoted in practice. My dissertation also led me to suggest a framework to enable nurses to improve sustainable healthcare, and I've put this at the end of the presentation for general interest. So 3 themes came from my research: the nurse's role, nurse leadership and advocacy, and sustainability in practice. The nurse's role explored the perceived responsibilities and duty to act, as well as nurses' knowledge and understanding to act. This looked at the responsibilities of nurses to practice in a sustainable way, which aligns to the Nursing and Midwifery Council's standards for proficiency and the Sustainable Development Goals. However, it also acknowledged that there's a lack of knowledge about why this is important and how to actually challenge practices and change them in the hospitals. The second point was nurse leadership and advocacy, and this highlighted the requirement for greater leadership in sustainable healthcare and a larger emphasis on organisational and strategical interventions. However, this section also spoke about the important advocacy role in which nurses can play, how we can use our trusted voices to influence policy and advocate for sustainability, both to our colleagues and to the public. Finally, I looked at sustainability in practice, looking at barriers and facilitators. It became apparent that a lack of a guiding framework or strategies impeded nurses' ability to be more sustainable, from simple things like recycling bins on wards. However, it also highlighted that behavioural change within nurses is a pivotal point for discussion. So what are some things that we can take away from this session today? So looking at our personal lives, our placement lives as student nurses, and our registered lives as nurses. So the main point for all of them, which you can see from the slide here, is conversations. And I think this is a really, really crucial point. Just conversations with your colleagues, with your friends, with patients, talking about sustainability, talking about how we can use our environmental awareness and link it into our health is key. Even little conversations such as, oh, remember to turn that light out when you leave the room, thinking about what can be recycled, all of those things, thinking about where our things come from, so origins of the materials that we're using. Recycling is always a big one, and I know within different NHS trusts this can be quite challenging as to what kind of waste can be segregated. However, trying to recycle what we can do. On a personal point, more meat-free days. I know there's lots of stuff out there about like there's a veganuary, trying to eat more plant-based meals, using public transport when we can, and really getting involved in any campaigns. The Royal College of Nursing have good campaigns which you can get involved on as a student and as a registered nurse. Get involved with your student society, try and promote greener healthcare, greener stuff around the campus, really trying to raise your voice and advocate for sustainability and for the raising awareness about the impact of climate change. Saving energy. At the moment, with energy prices going up, this is always going to be a good one. So turning off those lights, only using what needs to be done. And all of this can be translated into practice as well. So on placement, I understand as students, it can be really difficult to challenge practices. However, those conversations are still really, really key. And a big one is glove awareness. So remembering to only use gloves when you really need to. Thinking about the origins of where your materials come from. So those little cotton buds that we use a lot, thinking about where that cotton actually comes from and tracking back that journey and thinking about the carbon footprint that's gone into using some of these materials. Again, recycling what we can. And a big one is speaking to patients about the health co-benefits of sustainability. We can use primary prevention and encourage self-care with individuals for them to take their own responsibility for health and well-being. For example, we can encourage people to, when they're doing exercise within their rehabilitation, that this is good for your heart and lungs, but it's also great for the environment. Encouraging a well-rounded diet is really good for your health, but also reduces your environmental impact. Promoting telehealth options increases your patient's independence, but it also cuts down on transport emissions. Getting into nature is great for your mental health and well-being, but it also helps you to take care of the environment around you. So by talking about these co-benefits, we can also help people to make the connections between our health and our environment, and hopefully make sustainable thinking second nature. As nurses, we can get involved with procurement conversations. We can think of alternatives. For example, using the plastic cups on wards for medicine rounds. Is there anything else we can be using rather than using the single-use plastics each time? Rather than using individual saline flushes, if it's safe to do so, can we use a bigger flush and just take what we need at each time rather than opening a new plastic bottle each time? Coming in from your nursing journey as a student into your journey as a registered nurse, fresh eyes bring fresh thoughts. So really try and use your new innovations that you've got from your student nurse journey and take those into practice with you. So my research led me to propose a framework for improving sustainability in nursing practice. So I found different elements which made suggestions at an individual, organisational and strategic level, which are all interconnected. And when these elements come together, they suggest a multifaceted approach to empower and enable nurses to engage with and advocate for sustainable healthcare. So I'll leave this on my presentation and you can explore it in more detail if you're interested after the webinar. But the concepts were improved knowledge and awareness to inform action, leadership, voice and advocacy, organisational culture, policies and structure, and perceived behavioural control and self-efficacy. So the challenges presented by climate change to public health require healthcare services to adopt sustainable practices, but this needs to be an interdisciplinary approach. However, this can inspire a time of innovation, collaboration and leadership, and I feel that nurses are well positioned to spearhead and respond to this challenge. So I'll finish off with this quote, which I hope presents a positive mirror to the quote we started off with at the beginning of the presentation. Tackling climate change could be the greatest global health opportunity of the 21st century. And remember those small conversations, last one out, turn off the light. Thank you very much for listening.
Thanks very much, Jen. That was great. Lots of food for thought. And I think that whole co-benefits is and critical thinking really, isn't it? I mean, that's what we're taught to do as nurses all the way through, is to just think about everything that we're doing and thinking about it through that sustainable lens. I think is really important, and it's those small things, and not to think, oh well, I don't have a huge impact. It's about all those small things too. Thanks very much. I think what we'll do is, there's lots of people saying thanks in the comments box. Is we'll wait and we'll have questions at the end, because it may be, because you mentioned a few things that other people are going to talk about as well. So if you can, as I say, feel free to post your questions in the chat box just now, but we'll then go through and answer those at the end for you as well, if that's okay. Okay. Right, so I see that Rose has joined us, so that's quite fortuitous, since you were talking about some of the work that the Royal College of Nursing has been doing. So welcome, Rose. I don't know, do you want to just introduce yourself and then tell us a little bit about your work?
Thank you. So hello, well done, Jen. I caught the end of your presentation. It's fantastic to hear about all the work that you've been doing. So hello everyone, my name is Rose Gallagher. My day job, if you like, is as the professional lead for infection prevention and control at the Royal College of Nursing. So I'm a specialist nurse, and my role is a UK-wide role, and one of the best things about my role is that it has led me into sustainability. Excuse me, I'm getting over COVID. So I started my journey on sustainability by really becoming the procurement link between the RCN and the England NHS supply chain at that time. And that really highlighted to me and took me on a fantastic journey with others around the value of nurses' engagement in procurement, and that in turn has led to our work on sustainability. So what I've been able to do is to wear both my IPC hat and my procurement or sustainability hat to lead various programs of work, one of which I've heard that you've already mentioned today, which is our glove awareness campaign. And hot off the press, it has literally just been launched this afternoon, and I'll put some information in or send it over to Jen, and she can share it with you. So the RCN's work excuse me, on sustainability is really in its early stages. Like many other royal colleges, we are just beginning to understand our value and our contribution to this huge global emergency. So our focus is very much on the role of health and healthcare workers in reducing the effects of climate change. So healthcare is a significant contributor to our carbon emissions here in the UK. So if the UK is to meet net zero, then the NHS and other health and care services have to reduce their carbon footprint, number one. The second really important point that you have also heard is that this is a huge opportunity to improve the health of our nation. So by taking action on climate change, we can actually improve health, which in turn reduces the demand on health and care services. That has a positive impact on reducing the carbon footprint of the NHS. So more active travel, so ditching the car where you can, and walking a little bit more is better for you in terms of exercise, hopefully better in terms of reducing the air quality around you, because air pollution is a major contributor to cardiovascular disease and other diseases that impact on the NHS. A more plant-based diet, which I also heard, helps us in terms of staying healthy, avoiding ultra-processed food that come with a higher carbon footprint and are more unhealthy for us. So what we do is that we actually become healthier as a result of that. So the non-communicable diseases, the long-term conditions, etc., we hope will reduce in time over this. This is not meant to be a do-to piece of work in terms of the college, but to support people to make choices that fit with them and their lifestyles, and also how much they are able to afford. So it would be completely irresponsible, for example, for us to say that all nurses have to move to electric cars. I can't afford an electric car. Many nurses can't afford an electric car, but actually there are other steps that we can do, and we can support our patients to make healthy lifestyle changes as well. So I just wanted to let you know about a couple of things, and the most important one is that Glove Awareness Week, as Jen said, that has been launched this afternoon and is available on the RCM website. Glove Awareness Week will run from the 2nd to the 6th of May. You can download resources that you can use where you work, and use them in any way which helps you raise awareness in your place of work around gloves. Secondly, we're encouraging people to make one change. So we are asking people to really make small changes that, when we add them up together, make a significant difference across health and adult social care services across the UK. The RCN as an organisation is also in the final stages of putting together a significant business plan to help us develop a long-term strategy on sustainability. Now, we need to do a number of things in order to deliver on this. First of all, we have to look at the RCN as a business and look at our own carbon emissions and our own carbon footprint as an employer and as a business. Secondly, we need to do a really large piece of engagement with our members to understand what their priorities are. What do you want the college to tackle in terms of climate change that is relevant to nursing practice and will support you in your role as nurses? Once we have that information, that will allow us to develop some short, medium and long-term goals, and will represent the RCN strategy moving forward. We are a member of the UK Health Alliance on Climate Change, and we have several Scottish colleges that are members as well. It is a UK-wide alliance, and I'm delighted to sit on their executive and to support their work moving forward by representing nursing. And the focus of the UK Health Alliance is very much on the contribution of healthcare to climate change and the positive impacts, as I've said before, of taking action on climate change that improves health. So that's a very, very quick run through of some of the work that we're doing at the moment. I'd be very happy to answer any questions. If there's time, I'll be guided by you, or to receive any comments, really, if anybody would like to raise any this afternoon. Thank you.
That's lovely, Rose. Thanks very much. That was really interesting. And it sounds as if the RCN are doing a lot on this and want to continue. So I think we're going to do questions at the end. I'm not sure if you're able to stay till then, or
I'll probably have to nip off in about 15 minutes, but I'd be delighted to stay for another 15 minutes if that's okay with you.
Yep, that's fine. Well, are there any specific questions for Rose and her role, the RCN, just now that anyone wants to ask? It would need to just be put in the chat box. I see that people are already asking and people responding as well, which is great. So as I said, what we're going to do is set up a Padlet, and maybe if you've got resources, Rose, you can either share them with myself or Jen, and we can share that across the school. And that's
very happy to do that. Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, thanks very much. Thank you. So next, I'm just going to find the presentation. We're delighted to invite Sarah Howes and Jenny Aronson, who are both lecturers at the University of Plymouth. And I'll just make sure I've got the right presentation. I'll share that. There we are. Hopefully you can see that, and that's the right presentation. So I'll just let you introduce yourself, and I'm really looking forward to listening to how you've got on at the University of Plymouth. Thank you.
Thank you, Val. I'll just make a start to introduce myself. So my name is Jenny. I'm one of the lecturers working in adult health at the University of Plymouth. I work on a range of different programs, undergraduate, postgraduate, and nursing associate programs. But one of my main interests is sustainability, climate change, and planetary health. So I do quite a lot of teaching on those topics. I'm also doing my PhD, which is focused on sustainability awareness and attitudes from the perspective of nursing students and educators. So I'll just let you introduce yourself, Sarah, please.
Great, thank you. I'm Sarah Howes. I'm a lecturer in mental health nursing at the University of Plymouth, and like Jenny, I work on undergraduate and postgraduate programs, and I'm very involved in teaching sustainability content, but also content looking at our relationship with the natural world from a much more kind of mental health and psychological perspective, I guess. And together with Jenny and Andy, we help to run a sustainability, health and wellbeing interest group, which is open to colleagues and students from Plymouth, but also from further afield. And I'm also completing my PhD, hopefully in the not too distant future, and I'm looking at particularly wellbeing in relation to the natural environment, but from a nursing perspective. So that's me. Back to you, Jenny.
Thank you, Sarah. So I was contacted by Jen a while ago in relation to the teaching that we do in Plymouth. I believe that she had been in contact with Professor Janet Richardson, who led on the NERSAS project that Jen mentioned earlier. So that's how that link was made. And just to say thank you, Jen, for a really inspiring presentation. I think it's absolutely brilliant that this has started from a student's perspective. You led on this project and inspired your lecturers to support you, and now this has led to some change in your curriculum. So that's really inspirational. And it's great to see Rose from RCN with us today as well, and how the RCN is leading on this this change and this movement. So that's really positive. So yeah, Sarah and I are here to talk about what we are doing in Plymouth, and how we are partnering with students for sustainable practice and innovation in healthcare. So this is probably not a new slide for anyone, and Jen also mentioned the 17 Sustainable Development Goals in her presentation. So rather than talking about the goals, they were developed by the United Nations in 2015. I'm going to talk about what's happening at the University of Plymouth. So we are very lucky here that we have the Centre for Sustainable Futures, which is a community of practice which leads on sustainability education and has a very focused targets on meeting these sustainable development goals or contributing to. And obviously higher education institutions have got a really important role, because we are educating our students and are helping them to be global citizens and responsible citizens. So a really important contribution in terms of the sustainable development goals. And we have a sustainability hub here on campus in Plymouth, which brings together students, alumni, lecturers, educators across different departments and schools to talk about these issues. So that's a really good support for us working here. So bring it back to nursing. So the RCN, like Jen mentioned, the position statement from 2019, which identified healthcare as the major contributor to climate change and asserted that practitioners are ethically bound to develop a more environmentally friendly and sustainable care. And it was interesting that Jen was speaking about that climate justice lens as well. This springs from the fact that the NHS produces about 5.4% of the UK's greenhouse gases. So that's a grim fact, but also more positively, they are the first healthcare provider to commit to net zero. And you might have heard of the 3 pillars of sustainability, which is social, economic, and environmental. So often when we talk about sustainability, we think about the environmental impact, but actually there are other aspects as well to sustainability. And interestingly, if we become more sustainable, it could also save the NHS billions. So there is the financial implication in this as well. So thinking about what we do at the University of Plymouth and the School of Nursing and Midwifery. So we have some strong drivers within our school. And Benny Goodman, a lecturer, wrote a piece in 2011 which stated that we are embedding sustainability and climate change in the curriculum with the intention of motivating undergraduate students and alumni to address sustainability issues encountered in practice. And that's also very much pertains to postgraduate programs. So a little bit about how we work. So the Nurses Project, which has been mentioned a few times now, was the cross-European project working with universities in other countries of Europe between 2014 and 2017. And that was led by Professor Janet Richardson. And what that led to was a platform with educational materials, so how we can educate students about sustainability, about climate change, about planetary health. So we've got a great legacy from that, in that we are quite leading within sustainability education and trying to embed that, rather than having, as Val said in the beginning, rather than having just one module, one lecture, we're trying to embed that throughout our curricula. And importantly, we see our students as active learners, engaged in vocational education, developed to serve the needs of our communities. So we are trying to engage with students, support students who are interested, and help them to develop their ideas, much like what happened to Jen and her journey. We've found that it's more meaningful to students if we link the sustainability education to their clinical practice and the future role. So we try to align our learning with the clinical practice and think about their role as a future nurse. And we have a few websites which, if you just Google Sustainability School of Nursing and Midwifery, University of Plymouth, you'll see our websites which talk about more specifically what modules and kind of areas that we embed sustainability into, if you're interested in more information about that. So we talk about how we integrate that into public health modules, into research module, into management and leadership modules, all sorts of different modules, and how we can kind of make that purposeful in terms of sustainability. For example, we look at clinical aspects when we do our clinical skills modules and make students think about a few of those things that Jen already talked about. Where does the equipment come from? How can we think about waste management, reducing our impact, reducing our use of disposable items, for example. So a few of the different kind of approaches that we use. We do employ a hope-based narrative because it is quite a grim, can be quite a grim topic, and we want to look at it from a point of view that we are looking for solutions rather than listing facts about what's going on in terms of the climate crisis. So trying to look at solutions, what can we do as future nurses, as students, as in our personal lives. I really like what Jen wrote in your conclusion about fresh eyes, fresh thoughts. I wrote it down because I think that's a really good example of how students can make a difference. Quite often we know that when students go out in placement, they are able to challenge what's going on. And nurses and healthcare professionals like that, because they want to improve and they want to change things to the better. But sometimes you're just so used to doing things the way you always did it that you don't even think about that. So it's a really good position to be a student and go out in clinical practice and challenge things that you see. So we examine the relationship between the natural world, public and global health. So again, that's kind of looking at, so what's going on in the natural world, how can we use the nature, green spaces, blue spaces, as a resource, as an asset, in order for us to become healthier. Then we also look at the impact of climate change on mental and physical health. So what actually happens, what kind of direct and indirect impacts are there that will affect people's physical and mental health, and how can we then address that as nurses. We also look at experiential and reflexive encounters with nature as a therapeutic presence in healing and recovery. So that image there is from an initiative started by Sarah, who takes students down to the Plymouth Hoe and offer them to go wild swimming in the sea, or just sit on the beach if they don't want to go in the water. So that's very much experiential learning, which means that you are actually immersing yourself in nature and reflecting upon that experience and how that might help you. Healing, recovery can be from any health condition, or maybe just maintaining your current state of health, or coping with everyday life. And we also focus very much on practitioner well-being, because we know that, again, that's looking at the 3 pillars of sustainability, that social aspect. If you don't look after yourself, if you're not able to maintain a good health and well-being yourself, then you're not able to look after others. So that's the link there. And that's over to you, Sarah.
Okay, thanks, Jenny. So, you know, we've really tried to think about this. We've created resources, we've created videos with our students using a lot of the NurseUs materials. We've had engagement with universities across Europe to try and sort of tackle this problem and start to think about what are our attitudes, how can we change things, how can we do things differently. As Jenny's mentioned, we bring that into our clinical skills setting, where that's an active, regular part of the training for students, but we also get them to think about their relationship with the natural world and how and why that's relevant to nursing. And what we've found when we kind of do our initial introductions to students, it's really changed actually, because when we started doing this a few years ago, students would say to us that sometimes they struggled to understand why this topic was relevant. And when we've asked them the same questions in recent years, there seems to be a heightened awareness of the fact that we are using a lot of fossil fuels in the productions of plastics that we use and the resources that we use. So thinking about what Rose was saying, and Jen too in her excellent presentation, there is a real focus on understanding procurement issues and how we're using resources in practice, but also thinking about students on a personal level. So they come in with us, they do all this great stuff in the classroom, we get them out, we do experiential work. If they want to go, we don't make them go swimming in the sea, which is quite an important thing to probably mention to you. And what they often told us, they get very enthused, they want to make a difference, they're fired up, they're keen, and then they go out into practice. And sometimes, you know, in that business of being newly qualified and getting through your preceptorship and getting used to the areas that you're working in, it's really easy for some of this stuff to get lost. And unless you've got somebody working in that area who is a real champion and an advocate for sustainable practice, sometimes our students talk about feeling a little bit isolated and alone in making that transition and knowing what to do to make change in such big organisations, which was one of the things that I loved about Jen's presentation, and starting to think about putting together a framework and things that people can actually look to. And I made a note, Jen, of the things that you talked about nursing role, leadership and advocacy, and sustainable practice, and I'm gonna pinch those and mention those as we go through, if that's okay with you. So one of the things that we thought about, building on NERSUS, building on the stuff that was happening in the programs, was the introduction of our Sustainability, Health and Wellbeing Interest Group, which is affectionately known as SHWIG. And this group is a space, actually since the pandemic we've moved online, which has allowed us to open up to a much larger network. And so we invite our students to come along. Students often very involved in helping to develop content and curricula at Plymouth. So we invite students, we invite our alumni to come back and join us and have a space where they can come back and talk about some of their ideas and some of the things that they're facing in practice. And we also invite speakers to come and take part and talk about what they're doing in their particular areas of practice. So one of the people who recently came and spoke was Ros Davis, who's the general manager at Royal Cornwall Hospital down at Treliske in Truro in Cornwall, and she came and talked about some of the innovative solutions that they've adopted in practice, particularly arising out of the pandemic, things like the huge use of gloves and resources, and how they've recently also partnered with Cornwall Wildlife Trust. And they're using some of the profits, from the initiatives that they've introduced to help replant some of the kelp forest around the southwest coast. There's a definite kind of and really rather lovely relationship between the natural world that's supporting the health and well-being of people in the southwest, and being more thoughtful about the resources that we use and how we dispose of them. So that's just one example. We've also had our alumni come back and present and talk about the good work that they've done in practice, and I'm going to mention that a little bit more. We typically have 2 meetings a term to discuss research, practice development, innovations. We've also introduced a school sustainability prize, so our 3rd year undergraduates every year have the opportunity to submit a brief piece of work, thinking about particularly that link between what they're learning about sustainability practice and how they're going to take that forward out into their clinical roles, so that they've actually got a starting point that they can use to begin discussions with our colleagues in practice. And for some of our students to actually come back and use that as a basis to start planning for their masters and sometimes also their PhD studies as well. It's very much a partnership relationship with us at Plymouth, and I agree with Jenny. I particularly loved that this innovation for you at GCU came from Jen, came from students, and that's very much the spirit that we are trying to embody in our practice at Plymouth as well. We've now got interest from across the school, which I think is really important, from adult, child, mental health and midwifery. So this is something that's no longer just in a kind of pocket of interested care. This is now something that has become a real talking point for us. It's included in all of our school information, in our sort of online Moodle site. We've got sustainability content that all of the staff there can access and use in their materials and in their teaching. So our students are utterly brilliant, and they come up with really wonderful ideas, and they often want to actually take them out and work with them. So just to mention 3 of the students that we've worked with recently, Francesca won the Sustainability Prize in 2020, and she's really built on that work from the NERSUS project and has been looking at taking that out and developing education in practice. So rather than NERSUS being something that just remains within health education, within higher education, and something that nurse teachers or nursing students might have access to, she's looked at, well, how can we take the learning from that and make that more widely accessible in practice, and look at delivering education-based interventions out there. Liz, who was one of the students who actually must take the credit for helping to set up the lunchtime wild swimming sessions at Plymouth, approached me in one of our sessions at Plymouth and said, we've got this wonderful thing that we do, but the problem is we haven't quite got enough time. So we spoke, the students and I, in the module that I was delivering, and we felt that a meaningful contribution and discussion about student wellbeing and practitioner wellbeing was really, really important to us. So we decided that we would extend the lunch break in some of our sessions to an hour and a half, and that we would go as a whole group down to an area that, for us, we're very lucky, we're by the sea. In other places that won't be possible, but it's looking to the resources that you have locally. And we would walk together and we would use that time to talk about how we look after ourselves, keep ourselves well. If the weather's nice, could we bring a bit of a picnic in, have lunch together? People who want to could get in the sea. Liz previously worked for the RNLI as a lifeguard, so we kind of had safety aspects thought about there as well. But Liz, once she actually finished working at the university as a student, Liz went out into practice, and her passion and interest as a wild swimmer, as former lifeboat crew, led her to kind of look at the spaces that were available in hospitals and work at developing green space there. So in some places where it's kind of very busy and very urban, you might be more limited in what you can do, but it's still possible to do things like plant window boxes that bring pollinators into that environment and start thinking about that reciprocal relationship and those health co-benefits again there. Liz also took patients out to Forest School that was working with people with mental health difficulties, and she got involved in a project that you may have heard of, I'm not sure, called Chill UK, which looked at the benefits of cold water swimming, particularly on depression and anxiety. And recently I wrote down some things because I knew I wouldn't remember them, but that study has just kind of reached some of its first conclusions, working with NHS staff in Penzance and London, and they reported a 25% reduction in burnout and a 14% overall boost to well-being for staff in the NHS. So really interesting, really impressive results. And that was something that Liz was able to kind of focus on, that interesting research from our discussions at the university. And last but by no means least, Sarah, who's coming back to us as a postgraduate student now to study her master's degree with us. When she was doing some work for the Sustainability Prize, she was particularly interested. She's a student midwife, or she was, and she looked at some of the information around breastfeeding particularly, and she looked at the manufacturing and transportation of infant formula in 6 countries over a 12-month period, and that was equivalent to over 1 million tons of waste being sent to landfill, or 2 million acres of deforestation. She looked at waste formula sales accounted for 550 million cans and 86,000 tons of metal, 364,000 kilograms of paper to landfill. And she says that formula industry has doubled since 2009. So this isn't about shaming mums who can't breastfeed, but it's about taking some of this information into practice and using that conversation that Jen talked about. Did you know, because most people don't. We find that when we share some of this information, people are really astounded. And so creating opportunities for students to learn and really think about their passions and how they can share that knowledge and learning is really important. And these 3 particular former students, we are currently working on writing an article with them about this partnership relationship that we have. So Public Health England, NHS England, we're at an important crossroads where we consider our demographics, our use of resources, or the financial forecasts. It's widely accepted the current healthcare system is unsustainable without radical transformation. The way to get started is to quit talking and begin doing. And so that was a real point of emphasis for us. We could talk about all of this in our curriculum, but let's actually do it in our clinical skills lab. We could talk about student wellbeing, but let's actually do it. Let's go out and have some walks on the coast path and talk about this in real time. Get them out of the classroom. All our curricula are really densely packed, and we have the same problem as anybody else. But we found that when we stopped talking about the things that we couldn't do and what got in the way, and we started working with our students on what we could do and where there might be a little bit room, we began to be able to create change and make things happen. And that really contributed to that environment of hope that we talked about as being really central to what we're trying to do at Plymouth. So the 3 exemplars demonstrate the potential knowledge theory transfer, which we really feel embodies our approach to sustainability. So this is about creating change that's aligned with the ambitions of the RCN and the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. We've also really recently joined the Nurses Climate Challenge in Europe, partnering with Healthcare Without Harm and a number of universities across Europe. And it's really wonderful to get to talk to you and to see some good work beginning to happen in Glasgow. And we've also got colleagues in Brighton who we regularly talk with and meet with, who are also making some great progress. So for us, it's about healthy, reciprocal relationships between the natural world, humans, and healthcare, and trying to constantly think about how we can do that differently. So we don't have all the answers, but we're very much engaged in those conversations that Jen talked about. And we have, I'm not sure that we can share them with you here now. We do have a couple of videos that were produced at Plymouth. One short video looking at waste reduction potential, and a 10-minute video looking at some work that's happening with our students about resource use in Plymouth. So that's probably all for me from now, unless there's anything else that you'd like to add, Jenny.
No, thanks, Sarah. Just to say that if you wanted to, like Sarah said, our SHWIG group is now online, and we do have students, alumni, lecturers, clinical staff from across the country and international as well joining us. So if you are interested in joining the SHWIG group, please email us, both of us, one of us. Our emails are on this slide, and we'll just put you on the list, and we'll just send out, when there's an invitation, we'll send it to you. You won't be bombarded with emails, but you'll have a few emails a year suggesting that you can come to a meeting if you're able to. But I also noted that Val did say about you setting up maybe an interest group in Glasgow, and I think that's a brilliant idea. And if it's student-led, even better. Thank you.
Thank you both very much. That was really interesting, and I think it just adds not just the co-benefits, but the benefit to the yourself, as well as benefits to patients and clients, and also to the environment. So and I was very lucky to be at the seaside at the weekend there, and certainly felt the benefits, although the sky wasn't quite as blue as the ones in your photographs, but, but it was still lovely to be there. So yeah, absolutely, we'd be very keen to keep in touch, and I think joining with you and with other universities to see and share that good practice. And yes, as I said, we're very keen to set up some interest group, and if it could be student-led, that would be great. And so we've got a Padlet set up, and we'll put the link on for that. And I can then add resources and things to it for people to share, and email addresses, and your videos and things as well. If you share them with myself or Jen, then we can upload all that so that we've got a kind of resource for people to be able to use. So that would be brilliant. Okay, so thank you both very much. We will move on, and then hopefully we'll have lots of questions at the end. So my next slide, I'll just stop sharing this, and I'd like to introduce you to Paolo Cruz. He's our Sustainability Officer, Environmental Manager here at GCU, and he's going to just tell you a little bit about what we're doing here. If I can just make sure I can share this. Okay, so Paolo, over to you.
Hi everyone, and welcome. It's gone quite quickly. Didn't expect my turn to be just yet, so obviously having fun. I'm GCU Sustainability Officer. I'm based in the States, and our remit is in essence looking after the buildings and spaces that the university uses and operates. I don't have a nursing background. I am married to a nurse, and so I'll share with you what we're doing at GCU to try and make sustainability, make our operations a little bit more sustainable. So you guys might know this, but you know we are a city center location. We operate 13 buildings. Pre-COVID, we had about 20,000 people walking into our campus several times a week, and we spend about 17 million pounds a year on goods and services. And I suspect by in comparison to the NHS, that's insignificant. But for us, it's a sizable amount, and that pays for, you know, software services, computers, waste services, building repairs, etc. So we're, as I describe, a reasonably sized village. Our sustainability commitments, they're informed from a number of commitments in our current strategy. And the key ones are to be carbon neutral by 2040 and to contribute, and the other one is to contribute to the attainment of the Sustainable Development Goals. From a sustainability perspective, when we develop initiatives and measures and programs and interventions, we seek to have as many of these 5 outcomes as possible. First and foremost is to enhance the student experience at GCU, improve our operations, that's around cutting costs, for example, build capacity and transferable skills. So something that you're able to do at GCU, you should be able to do it elsewhere. So if you cycle to campus, you might be able to cycle to placements. Or if you get into the habit of cycling to campus, you could get into the habit of cycling elsewhere. If you get into the habit of recycling at home, there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to recycle at GCU. We're very keen in working with students in developing academic projects and collaborations, and we're also very focused on ensuring that our work contributes to the Sustainable Development Goals. In broad terms, our current priorities are first and foremost reducing our carbon footprint. The university has acknowledged the climate emergency, and we're very much focused on reducing our own carbon footprint. We seek to reduce wastage and costs, and please note the difference. It's not just waste that we seek to reduce, but any sort of waste, whether it's time, energy, water, resources, we seek to cut it. We hope to promote healthy habits and encourage positive environmental behaviors. We're looking to encourage more biodiversity on our campus, and we very much seek to work with others to collaborate for sustainability. I'll give you a couple of examples, maybe about 3 or 4, of some of the initiatives we have to make our campus more sustainable. One of the most recent developments is our new climate conscious travel and expenses policy. This is primarily for staff, or it is for staff, or travel paid by the university. And that stipulates that people should think about the travel hierarchy before they plan to travel. So do they need to travel? How can they get there? Is the train the best option? Can they avoid flying? And so on. And along that, it also encourages colleagues to not fly to destinations they can reach in 6 hours by train. And we have a pledge campaign that we invite people to put a banner on their email signature, and that's the top right graphic. We're looking at the journey planning tools so that staff making car journeys for GCU will enter their journey parameters, and then it'll suggest what is the best type of vehicle. And we estimate that about 90% of our journeys could be done in an electric vehicle, and also confer significant savings to the uni. We are working on electrifying a very small fleet of vehicles. We have about 5 vehicles, and we hope that in the short-term future they will become electric. For students, we have a team of travel advisors. Those are the guys in the blue t-shirts. And at the beginning of term, or at the academic year, before people have committed to particular travel arrangements, and when there's an opportunity for change, they reach out to students and they help them realize that for GCU students, cycling and walking to campus is an option for 54% of them. If cycling isn't an option, then they provide other information that will help commuters reduce the environmental impact of their commutes. And we're also a cycle-friendly campus, which is a Scottish award that recognises significant investment to encouraging cycling. From waste and recycling perspective, we send no waste to landfill, and we recycle about 50 to 60% of our waste. The other gets processed for energy recovery. We charge for single-use containers, particularly hot beverage cups and hot food containers. And the idea there is that to shift away from these. So pre-COVID, about 30% of the hot beverages we were selling on campus were in reusable containers. And that not only cuts waste, but because these things, the cups aren't being put in our bins, they're not materials we separate for recycling. Another example is we have water fountains on every floor of every building, so there's no need for people to buy water bottles. They can just refill their own. And in the very near future, we're going to introduce a stationary station, and this is where we put surplus stationery and make it available to students. So if you need a pen, a pocket wallet, a document wallet or something, a folder, a notepad, you can go to the stationery station and see if there's one there. And that will be stocked with stationery that is usually surplus to requirements after office moves or conferences, events, and things like that. Apologies for the graphics. So we do a bit on sustainable food. Our caterers have worked quite hard to get Soil Association Food for Life served here, and that's where they're recognized for promoting or serving healthier menus, freshly prepared. We are also working on re-accrediting as a fair trade university, and that's in recognition for making available products that pay fair wages and guarantee good working conditions for farmers and those involved in the supply chain. And we're also working with the caterers to look at a lower carbon menu. So that's in its infancy. And that's where we look at the ingredients in our menu and we try and see if we can provide lower options, lower carbon options. Now, earlier on, I mentioned that we look for academic collaborations, and the work on carbon in the menu has benefited from inputs from a number of students' assignments. There was a student dietitian a few years ago that surveyed diners in the restaurant, and he asked if you were queuing in the restaurant and you got to the end of the queue and there was no meat-based dishes, would you walk away? 80% of respondents said no. And knowing that there might not be meat in the menu, would you return? And 80% of respondents again said yes, they would. And the purpose of that was that we could use that survey to kind of reassure our caterers that they probably wouldn't lose out on sales. We also have, I think, 3 other projects: a focus group, a taster group, and a survey, which were run by 3 groups in the the Glasgow School for Business and Society. And again, it was to try and pick up key patterns, trends, and insights that might help us reassure our caterers that they weren't going to have their profitability compromised, and also understand what sort of issues people might have concerns about. For example, where do I get my protein from? Is it healthy? Does it taste nice? And so on. On biodiversity, being a city center campus, one might think that there isn't that much of an opportunity to do much, but there is indeed a little bit of opportunity. So a few years ago, we planted as a student project with students in the School of Computing, Engineering and Built Environment. We planted 140 trees across campus, which was fantastic. We're now looking with our arborist to see where we can put some more trees. Last summer, we installed 26 bird boxes, and those bird boxes are part of a study at Glasgow University looking at the impact of light pollution on hatchlings hatchlings. And it's part of the study has 600 bird boxes, and we're at the city centre end, and the other extreme is at the foothills of Ben Lomond, out towards Loch Lomond. And we also we have a colleague also in the School of Health and Life Sciences, and he comes on campus and he rings birds. So the gull that you can see here, which he suspects came from Scandinavia, was seen in Portugal a few weeks later. So it's a fantastic story that, you know, what some people might just see as a common gull is actually a prolific traveler. So it's a really nice story. And just one last slide on wildlife. Picture on the left is the sort of bird boxes we have, and on the right is a photo of 4 of the 8 hatchlings we had last year. We put out the bird boxes quite late last year, so we only had 8 hatchlings. This year we hope to be more. And last but not least, we've recently installed a nesting box in the rooftop of one of our buildings in hope that we could attract a peregrine falcon. And having a bird of prey on your premises is pretty awesome as far as these things go. So we're keeping our fingers crossed. So I thought, probably touch lightly on like personal action. So the personal action, you can take personal action in your professional lives and in your personal life. Often there's a crossover. So I'd almost leave you with almost, because there's one more slide after here, with an encouragement that you look at your life and consider if there's scope to change anything, to make more sustainable life choices. Could you change what you buy? Could you change how you travel? Could you change what you eat? And chances are that there is plenty of scope for change, but baby steps first, and don't try to change too many things at once. Otherwise, you might get disheartened, or it might be too challenging. So, for example, if you think there was a question earlier on about meat. If you think that there's room for less meat in your life, and UK statistics say that for most of it is, consider perhaps slowly eating, switching to less meat, or perhaps switching to lower impact carbon types of meat. So red meats tend to be the least healthy ones, so maybe move to white meats. So I'd encourage you to reflect on that. Last but not least, and this is definitely the last one, I want to share a project that was developed by one of our PhD students here at the uni, and it's an invitation to those amongst us that perhaps enjoy buying fashion. And the invitation is that, could you go 10 weeks without buying new fashion and reflect on the experience, ideally in the private blog that the students